He has to repay over £10,000 in debt that he took to move to the UK. What? This lovely gentleman over here is Anthony Mbare. Anthony left his job in Kenya to pursue a career as a care worker in the UK. Anthony is a father of 3, a carpenter by trade, and he left his job to become a care worker in the UK. Anthony sold all his belongings after leaving his job and paid £2,500 in admin fees to this agency that promised him a job as a care worker in the UK. He was promised minimum wage and a minimum of 40 hours a week working as a care worker. And to Anthony, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, as this would mean that he would make over 10 times his salary that he currently made in Kenya. So this father of 3 arrives in the UK and he begins working. And in the beginning, he finds the job tough, but at the same time, he finds it very rewarding. And as time goes by, he builds a really good relationship, a bond, you could say, with the patients that he takes care of. And most of Anthony's patients are palliative care patients or end-of-the-life care patients. And he builds a bond with the patients. He builds the bond with the relatives of the patient as well. And as time goes by, these relatives even see Anthony as part of the family. But as time goes by, Anthony realizes that the promises that his sponsor gave him is not what is going on, is not what is actually happening on the ground. He is barely getting the 40 hours a week, so he is not making enough money to sustain himself or to pay his children's school fees. Now you're probably wondering how this is happening. According to an article by The Guardian, it seems that Anthony is working less hours than he was promised. So Anthony is leaving home at 7 a.m. in the morning and is coming back home at 11 p.m. at night. That is over 16 hours a day working. Now, he has to go to each client and he works with each client for 30 minutes. After that, he needs to drive to the next client and work another 30 minutes. But when he is driving, he is not paid for this. And if he gets to, let's say, goes from client A to client B, and he gets to client B, let's say 15 minutes earlier, he has to wait until his actual appointment time, and then he will start working during his appointment time for those 30 minutes. So he is basically working, 2 to 3 hours in 30-minute chunks. So Anthony is basically not paid for these gaps and these long periods of waiting time. And he has to sit in the car in the freezing, cold winter UK weather. And someone else might think, oh, why doesn't he just go home and rest and come back when it's the next appointment time? The big issue here is fuel. Fuel currently in Europe costs a lot of money. So if he drives back to his home, that's going to cost him much more money. So he doesn't have the privilege to go home and rest. He just has to sit in his car until the next appointment. Now, when he got this job, Anthony was promised £21,000 a year. And he was like, you know what, that's a really good amount. That's definitely an amount that I can leave Kenya for and leave my job for and leave my family and 3 kids for. Now, with the pay slips that Anthony had from September till January 2023, those pay slips showed that Anthony would only make £12,000 to £13,000 a year instead. And this is just a little bit over half of what he was actually promised. Now you're probably wondering and thinking, oh my God, this is terrible. But you know what? it gets worse. Now, Anthony's employer then comes back to Anthony and says, look, you need to agree to a new vehicle policy that we have. And this policy means that this vehicle that you are driving, you are going to be responsible for the road tax. You are going to be responsible for the insurance, as well as any maintenance that is needed for this vehicle. And Anthony calculates this, and he finds out that this will cost them hundreds and hundreds of pounds a month. And his employer says, alternatively, what you can do is you can buy a vehicle at cost price, and what we can do is we can take this amount off your payslip every month, and still this amount is hundreds and hundreds of pounds a month, which Anthony cannot afford at this point. So Anthony's like, look, I cannot afford this. So he raises it with his manager and says, look, I cannot afford this. And he raises it in hopes that, him and the company can come to an agreement, and in hopes to resolve this. Instead, allegedly, the company fires him and then informs Home Office that we have cancelled his sponsorship, which means that affects his visa. In the termination letter that Anthony received, he was dismissed because he was not complying with this new vehicle policy, and he was talking to other employees as well about this, so they fired him for insubordination as well. And Anthony is frantic now, he writes to Home Office hoping to appeal this decision, but he receives nothing. It's silent, no response from Home Office. And then on the 1st of August 2023, Anthony receives a letter from Home Office, and Home Office is like, look, you have to secure a new sponsor or you have to leave the UK within 60 days. And remember, this is a father of 3, he has expenses, and he still has this large debt that he needs to pay. So Anthony goes around, he's panicking, he applies for jobs, and he actually even gets interviews and some offer of employment as well. But they ask him for a United Kingdom reference, which Anthony cannot get from his previous employer. So the whole getting a new job process stalls, and he cannot secure the new job, and the 60 days is coming up. And sadly, on 26 August, after Anthony has tried his best to get a new job, he's exhausted all his options, he decides, you know what, this is the end. Instead of facing deportation, he packs up his belongings and he flies home to Kenya with basically nothing to show but these debts that he incurred. Now, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, this is an isolated incident, but it's not. There are so many immigrants who come to the UK, they have a sponsor, the sponsor has promised them, these amazing hours of work, this good wage, and they come to the UK, they pay these admin fees, they pay these training fees, they pay these relocation costs, and flights are not cheap anymore. And they arrive in the UK and they barely scrape by. And most of them, end up in what you could say is modern slavery. Some of them speak up, and like in Anthony's case, they end up having their visa revoked. I had a lump in my throat when I first read Anthony's story. If you want more details on his story, I'm going to leave a link to an article done by The Guardian covering Anthony Mbare's story, and you can take a look as well if you like. But I want your opinion. I want your thoughts. What do you think? Do you think that Anthony was unfairly treated? Thanks for stopping by. Bye-bye.